It's a multi-channel approach is probably the one that you want to think about. I think, the group purchasing organizations are going to give them a broad reach, but there's still a lot of work to do behind that. I think understanding kind of the ability of these channels and the way to leverage them and when to leverage them. You may not choose to leverage the GPO first. That may be sort of a later strategy for you as you've grown and sort of established yourself in the market. But I think every situation is unique and different, and it just, especially if you're thinking about physician preference items, it depends on the space that the product kind of fits in the market.
Welcome, MedTech Gurus. Today we're joined by a standout guest, Amy Brouhle, Vice President of Strategic Business Development at S2N Health. Amy brings more than 20 years of healthcare experience spanning clinical practice, commercial strategy, and business development. Starting her career as a registered nurse, she's built a strong foundation in patient care before transitioning into leadership roles that bridge the clinical and business sides of healthcare. Before joining S2N Health, Amy held senior positions with organizations such as Vizient, Hillrom, and GE Healthcare, where she led national accounts, developed go-to-market strategies, and built partnerships that accelerated adoption of innovative technologies. Her tenure at Vizient gives her a unique perspective on how group purchasing organizations influence healthcare delivery and procurement. Insight she now applies to help both startups and established MedTech companies navigate commercialization. At S2N Health, Amy leads strategic partnerships and commercialization initiatives, helping MedTech organizations translate data-driven intelligence into scalable growth. Using S2N's RepSignal, an AI-powered commercial intelligence platform, she and her team turn market data into actionable insights, supporting faster product launches, stronger investor positioning, and more successful go-to-market execution. Hey, Amy, are you ready to be our guru today?
Hi, Tom. I am. Thank you for having me.
We're excited to have you. So tell us something fun or interesting about yourself or your family so we can get to know you a little better.
Sure, Tom. I started my career as a bedside nurse in the emergency department. So I have a unique perspective on fast-paced, agile environments, if you will, and probably a bias towards practical solutions that work in real-world clinical settings. And on a personal note, I probably should have my head examined, but we got a puppy recently. And so, certainly thinking about adaptability and patience matters in all angles of life.
Yeah. So what's the puppy's name?
His name is Johnny Cash.
Oh,
Cash.
I like it. Yeah, I like it. So obviously going to be a musical howler, it sounds like.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah, right. So, Amy, your experience spans provider, pharma, and MedTech. And I'm just kind of curious, what were some of the pivotal moments at organizations like Vizient that prepared you for your role at S2N Health? Can you give us some insights there?
Yeah, absolutely. Vizient was a formative inflection point, I would say, right? Their span of influence is broad in that they are working with certainly a lot of provider organizations, but then a lot of medical manufacturers, pharma, bioscience, others. So really kind of crossing that overall span, which really kind of gave me better insight into both the provider acquisition strategy, market trends, sort of what was impacting both the provider segment and the life science segment, if you will, but also I think that important exposure to the GPO, group purchasing organization dynamics. Is it related to contracting complexity, pricing, channel strategy, system level economics? Also varying heavily by market. But really, I think the key takeaway there is that, great technology doesn't necessarily guarantee adoption. And the understanding of that value access committee process and how that works for our manufacturers is critically important. So I think that gives us deeper expertise into our customers' and their process, which makes us a better partner for our medical manufacturing clients to think about how to deliver and tailor solutions that are going to help them sell.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Once upon a time, I spent a couple of years at a GPO myself, and it's interesting to see that side of the desk and that type of analysis. And it really does, I think, provide some unique insights into some commercialization strategies, doesn't it?
It does. And I think they're constantly evolving. I think the definition of value between both a provider and a manufacturer pharma organization has evolved and really requires, I think, evolving strategies on the part of all of those organizations.
Yeah, that's for sure. And at S2N Health, if I've got this right, you and your team really focus on turning the really data into actionable insights for MedTech. And if I've got it, you've said that connecting disparate data sources is critical. So maybe you can help us out. How do you help companies move beyond that raw data to actionable insights?
Most organizations we work with don't have a data problem, right? They're spending inordinate amounts of money on data assets to give them, to drive direction. The problem is they don't have a lot of insight, right? There's a lot of data and not a lot of insight. And actually, interestingly enough, S2N stands for signal to noise. And so we really exist and we're founded to help our organizations find the signal in that data so that we are helping them align across both BUs and more enterprise-wide as they think about sort of how the disparate data assets are coming together to give them a consistent signal to drive the business and to think about sort of where they go next and how to leverage that data in a way that is cohesive and comprehensive so that they're all rowing in the same direction. Because the number of organizations, large enterprise that we've talked to who will have BUs buying disparate data, clearly important to drive their strategies and their outcomes from a sales and commercial marketing perspective. But the signals they're picking up might be different. And our ability to sort of synthesize those things into a common signal, if you will, and help them drive results is really an opportunity for us.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I may put you on the spot here a little bit, but when you get that kind of data or that volume of data, isn't it sometimes just really about asking the right question than just any question?
It is. I think you've really got to understand the market. You've got to understand your product fit. You've got to understand the patients that you're serving. I think all of those things are critically important. And then I think understanding sort of how to leverage that data in a way that you get the most out of it, because not all opportunity is created equal.
Yeah, for sure. That actually kind of leads into my next question, really, because I was looking at a study that your team has. I think it's called "From Overstock to Opportunity," and it highlighted an enterprise medical device company that partnered with you and your team at S2N to address declining orders in one of its diagnostic products. So walk us through how your team helped them increase product utilization by aligning that sales and market effort in finding untapped market segments. That was really an interesting study.
Yeah, and I think it actually also speaks to an opportunity that a lot of organizations have to better align their marketing strategies with their sales or commercial strategies as well, and helping those organizations work more closely together. In this case, overstock and contracting issues are a problem for a lot of organizations. And in this case, the product we were working with had two clinical indications, one being leveraged, I would say, more heavily than the other, which to some degree was a little bit of a forgotten indication, if you will. The company recognized there was significant opportunity in that untapped indication. And they recognized that they had a lot of customers who had overstock on their shelves. So we were able to partner with them both from a sales and a marketing perspective to draft a data-driven targeting strategy where we took data that looked at leveraging analytics for high potential customers who had a lot of that secondary indication, providing information on those physicians directly to the field so that they could action on those. And then really understanding the overall US market opportunity for that indication to better educate the company and the reps overall so that they were better positioned in their speaking points going into the organizations in that secondary indication that they, generally speaking, hadn't spent a lot of time in. And as a result of all of that work, we improved the alignment between marketing, sales, and their strategy arm. We thought about accelerated field execution and the uptake of and decrease of the overstock uptake of the product. And it supported both the immediate commercial results, but also the long-term planning as the organization was thinking about how are they going to think about this product and the opportunity that this product represents for them going forward.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and you touched on an area that piqued my interest a little bit because I think it's often overlooked, and that was the education of the sales team as well, right? So, did you find that going through this that it really kind of helped maybe reinvigorate the sales team and get them motivated in a little different way?
I think so. I mean, I think
Mhm.
that there was, and being a former rep myself,
Mhm.
understanding sort of the reluctance of the field. They've worked in a certain way. They know their providers. They know who their targets are. So it takes a little bit of trust and engagement to think about how to think about the expanded indication in a new set of maybe providers you haven't called on before. But I think giving the confidence of there's a clear path to getting to opportunity and getting to value through this additional indication is really, I think, and making sure that the reps understood there's a win in there for them, really made it worthwhile.
Yeah, yeah, that's fascinating. That had to be a fun project to work on. And Amy, a lot of our gurus out there are, entrepreneurs or soon to be entrepreneurs. And many medical technology companies, especially in early stages, struggle with commercialization and scaling. And I'm just curious if you can help us out from your vantage point. What are some of the common pitfalls you see? And then perhaps how does S2N Health help overcome some of those?
So, I think it's the some have a limited understanding of the true market opportunity. I think we see that a fair amount. They have thought for so long about the development of the product and the technology that's gone into that development, and in some cases the regulatory approvals for those products, that when it then comes time to pivot to a commercialization lens, the idea that understanding market and market opportunity, market size is critically important. I think product market fit and understanding the patient populations that will benefit from the technology is also critically important. And I think in some cases, we see some organizations that are thinking really narrowly. And I think our ability to sort of think about it more broadly and think, hey, I understand this is your preliminary indication that you've gotten approval for, but hey, here are two or three others that you may want to think about down the road to expand sort of what you're thinking about from an opportunity lens perspective. I think that's important. And I think also the importance of understanding acquisition strategies for the providers that they're targeting is also critically important. We get a lot of those questions. You've seen one value access team, you've seen one value access team. They all operate slightly differently, and those evolve. So I think really understanding the champions, the market, the customer, and the customer acquisition is critically important.
Yeah, it's got to be a breath of fresh air, I would think, for some of those founders that you might work with, right? Because you're so focused on getting through those FDA hurdles, right? And you get through that, and you're like, okay, so what's next? And it would seem like you and your team can really help them, kind of be that guide. Is that what you're seeing out there?
It is. It is. And I think we've got a really unique perspective on the way to go through the phases of commercialization, because they are really truly phases as we think about sort of where you start from a go to market sizing perspective and kind of moving through a process. I think we do a really good job outlining that for our customers, and then really thinking about the actionability of that information at the end to get to that speed to value, right? To get to the end goal of driving revenue, driving growth, and satisfying your investors, or the street if that's the space that you're heading.
Yeah, that's got to be fun when you get to that actionable part. I'm sure you've seen some light bulbs come on with some of your founders, right?
We have. And it's also interesting to think about sort of I think the opportunity for particular technologies and particular spaces. Some, I think, applications are broad, some are more narrow. Certainly clinically, for me, it's incredibly rewarding to see technology that's being brought to market to help populations that maybe we haven't seen a technology before that's going to help a certain patient population. So that's incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, being a former bedside nurse, I can see that for sure. So, Amy, your title includes strategic business development. So, for our gurus out there that are trying to commercialize and scale, how do you see partnerships like with GPOs and helping them with their pricing and contract strategies? It gets so complex sometimes. So, how should they be thinking about the other components of their pricing and contract strategies, like some of the direct contracting or strategic national accounts and payers? Can you help us kind of sort that out a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And when I think about these, I think about them as channels, right? And I think about the opportunity, and each channel is highly specific and has its own traits and its own sort of challenges to navigate. But I think if we break them down from a channel perspective, if you start with the GPO, right? You start with group purchasing organizations, and that's a big decision for small companies to make. But really, that gives you that sort of overarching access strategy, I guess I would call it, and the ability to sort of get in the door, maybe, of some of these hospitals that you wouldn't necessarily be focused on. So I think that's one channel. I think there's a direct contracting channel as well, as you think about strategies for those large national IDNs. I think about an HCA or an Ascension or a Common Spirit, who have regionality to them because each of those regions are going to have different needs. So as you think about contracting with them, you think about pricing with them, there's going to be a fair level of variability, but they have a lot of experience in working with organizations directly. And I think that's an important channel as well, not to be overlooked. I think distributor channels are certainly another opportunity, especially when you think about alternative sites of care, as we see shifts of procedures to ambulatory surgery centers or physician office and office-based labs. Those can be real challenging for organizations because they are so disparate, right? They're so segmented and they're all over the place, and it's difficult to sort of think about a field force that could cover the number of facilities that exist in those spaces. But distributors could be an interesting opportunity to explore in that case to get the product in market. And then lastly, I think there's the opportunity with strategic partnerships. And if you think about partnerships as a channel, that could be a partner who is a complementary partner who augments your solution and brings a broader solution to a health system potentially. It could also be an introductory channel, a different way to get in the door, whether it's payer, could be payer. We're having a lot of conversations about unique payer opportunities. So I think there's a lot of different ways to look at those channels and to think about how to leverage them differently, but having a strategy for each is I think, incredibly important to cover the market dynamic.
Yeah, it's really refreshing. Like your team can help sort that out, right? Because I have a lot of conversations with really smaller companies, under $15 million, and they're thinking, gosh, I've got to have this GPO agreement because that's going to get me in the door. But if I follow what you're saying, right, there's other ways that you can do this, right? Think about some of those regional IDNs or some of the other types of distributors. That might be a lower bar for them to get through. Am I on the right track with that?
I think that you are. I think you are. I think, there's I think it's a multi-channel approach is probably the one that you want to think about. I think, the group purchasing organizations are going to give them a broad reach, but there's still work to do there, right? That's not a sort of some organizations see that as sort of a panacea. Oh, I get access now, but there's still a lot of work to do behind that. And so I think understanding kind of the ability of these channels and the way to leverage them and when to leverage them. You may not choose to leverage the GPO first. That may be sort of a later strategy for you as you've grown and sort of established yourself in the market. But I think every situation is unique and different. And it just, especially if you're thinking about physician preference items, it depends on the space that, the product kind of fits in the market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's helpful. And your platform at S2N includes capabilities like AI-powered analytics. There's some CRM integration, territory optimization, and lead scoring. From your perspective, how do you ensure commercial teams actually adopt the technology and use it to its full potential? Because there's a lot going on there, right? So, how do you help with some of that implementation?
I think from our perspective, the adoption of the technology is really driven by a tight alignment between strategy, marketing, and the commercial organization. So thinking about how we can align with our customers in those functions really closely. I think because there's value for each of them and the value is slightly different, but we serve a lot of utility to organizations. It's not just to the field sales team, it's to marketing, it's to strategy. We really try to be that true commercial partner, if you will. I think we also have a unique understanding of our customers' product market fit. I think certainly as I work with customers and I think clinically about the solution that they're bringing to market and how that fits with a particular provider or a particular patient population, I think we've got a different perspective on some of those things than maybe others do just based on the overall expertise of our entire team. And then I think, we also think about things like territory planning and how does territory planning align with the goals of this emerging organization and the emerging tech, and how should that be structured and where do you invest, right? It's really expensive to stand up your field teams, and we understand how expensive that can be and how important those resources are. So we're really thinking about how do you get the most out of those important resources. And we think about things like not just market trends, but what are the payer trends? And I referenced that, but what are the demographic trends in a market? What's happening kind of from both a macro and a micro perspective that is going to help these organizations really get to that speed to value.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And as you're talking and describing that, I'm also thinking about that mid-level CEO or CFO. I would think by getting that kind of input from your team might help them with the investor groups, right?
It does. It does. Yeah. It's not unusual for us to um, work with organizations to help them refine that messaging to that investor community, to provide that market intelligence, if you will, market sizing information for them. We do a lot of that work, and we're a lot of repeat work with those organizations as they refine sort of that pitch as they go through kind of their evolutionary stages. Lots of repeat work, if you will, which is just a testament, I think, to the partnership that we seek to drive with our clients.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And Amy, growth is often constrained by resources and timing too, to kind of build on what you're just saying there. So what do you tell medtech companies about prioritizing where to go next, right? And how to fund that growth, right? Because there's a lot of different avenues, right? So you kind of have to pick one and then go from there. So, how do you help them with that?
Yeah, great question. I think it speaks to the ability to understand the overall market size and where the opportunity is, to your point. I'll give you an example. One of the things we do with our customers in a lot of cases is what we call a custom lead score. And that custom lead score brings together many pieces of data and really helps sort of refine opportunity or segment opportunity, because as we know, not all opportunity is created equal, as I've mentioned before. So thinking about things like procedure volumes, diagnosis, industry trends, industry payments, those kinds of things, and weighting those factors against sort of things that are most important to our customers and our customers' customers, things like past sales, if it's a new launch, if you will, from an existing enterprise customer. Some of those things really help refine for us where to go for opportunity. And that opportunity allows us to sort of help them think about what rises to the top and use those resources in those ways against those opportunities that we think are going to drive the greatest value for the organization.
Yeah, gotcha. So, Amy, if you could give one piece of advice to some of our gurus out there who are medtech entrepreneurs looking to translate this innovation into revenue and scale, what would that one piece of advice be?
I think a deep understanding of the market opportunity is critical, as we've talked about. I think understanding the customer as well, the customer's acquisition contracting strategy. I'll use an example. Pulse field ablation, right, is new in the market and rapidly growing. Really important technology. That market's pivoted even already. That technology's been out a year. Those cases are now being done in the ambulatory surgery center. I'm not sure that our large enterprise clients would have expected that pivot so quickly, but I think expecting the unexpected and being ready for that as well is critically important. And I know you can't sort of anticipate some of those things, but understanding what's happened in the past is a barometer potentially to the future, especially in things like market shifts, changes in site of care, changes in payer dynamics, I think are really important from an anticipatory perspective.
Yeah, I would think your team's kind of able to help them navigate some of those changes too, right? As we talked earlier, what the channel shifting, and you better heads up, you better think about this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And really understanding that concept of, hey, our procedure was done in this site of care yesterday. Today we're seeing it done here. Can you help us map that today from a market perspective so we can understand it, because it has direct reimbursement implications and margin implications. But then what can we anticipate in the future as we think about looking down the road and what's to come from a forecasting perspective? So I think those are all important concepts.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So it seems like a real exciting time for you and your team. What does the future hold? Where are you going from here?
I think we've got a lot on the horizon for us. AI is a huge opportunity for us as we think about leveraging AI to drive efficiencies in the field process. We know those resources are wildly expensive and there's always pressure on SG&A. So using AI to drive efficiency, I think, and really gaining the most out of the field resources and the clinical resources too, who are also wildly expensive. So I think that's an opportunity for us. I think, increasing focus on contracting and some of those opportunities, and then really leveraging our overall expertise and finding new data assets. They're going to help our clients think and create better visibility for them as they do their planning are some of the areas we're focused on.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, Amy, first of all, I'd like to just thank and acknowledge you for the time and insights you brought to us as our guru today. If somebody wants to learn more, how do we find out more? Are you on LinkedIn? Is there a website? How do we learn more about what you and your team are up to?
Absolutely. I think first I'd direct people to our website at S2NHealth.com. If you want to learn more about our solutions and our expertise and the ways that we're working with clients. And then certainly I'm on LinkedIn. So please, if you've got questions, want to have additional conversations, please reach out. Happy to connect on LinkedIn as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, Amy, once again, thank you so much for being our guru today. I really appreciated the opportunity to speak with you and the insights that you brought for us.
Thank you, Tom. We appreciate the opportunity as well.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to MedTech Gurus. I am Sylvester Harris, your MC. If you want to learn more about Tom and his consulting services, you can go to www.pctmedical.com or email Tom at tom@pctmedical.com. Now, I can be reached at Sylvester Harris, that's SylvesterHarris 5048@gmail.com. And I'd be pleased to discuss any voiceover work that you may want for your company or broadcast. Hey, thanks so much for listening, and catch us on the next episode of MedTech Gurus.